2 months back, I was going through the Steam summer sale and found Ori and the Blind Forest. It looked cool, and holy shit. For this kind of game, you wouldn't expect too much of a story, which is why it's odd that it's not just good for a video game, but good as a video game. Often games will have 5 minutes of backstory that sets up one goal, and you completing that one goal at the very end, with nothing going on in the middle. You really don't have to do too much to exceed most games there. Hell, Ori's actual story isn't too original when you really get down to it. If it were a movie, it wouldn't stand out too much, but imagine going through the most exciting part yourself. It has the ability to take the climax of a movie like soaring through the air, barely escape being crushed, and put that in the game with challenging gameplay so you feel like you are Ori. What I think the intro did well, other than the obvious, is giving you an understanding that Ori is not strong. Ori's not even a fighter, and that doesn't change. With the exception of the Charge Flame, and to some extent the Stomp, all your skills are mobility based, and it ends the most exciting parts with a reminder that you're still at the bottom of the food chain in this forest. That's what I'm talking about when I say feel. I mean, the way the game plays is exactly how the character acts. You're supposed to be the smallest and weakest thing here, and the whole game is built like that. The amount of screen space you take up is next to nothing. Despite how many life pickups you find, it still only takes 3 to 4 hits before you're done. The closest thing the game has to boss fights is just you running away from more stuff than usual, and all the enemies can take 7 to 8 hits before your normal attack takes them out, making it take way too long. It all gives off a reminder that you're not strong, you're small. But that's where everything else comes in. You can charge your flame, which still doesn't do too much, but since every projectile has its own physics, you can knock everything else away from you, and if you're good enough, back at the enemy. Same thing with the Stomp, which can actually be used to go some places early, if you're good enough. You see this? This is when I knew Ori was gonna be good. The second-to-second gameplay feels a lot more like Super Meat Boy than Super Metroid. You're expected to die a few times before finishing any part, and every room feels like its own obstacle, after which there's a quick second of downtime before the next room comes in. It's a simple structure, but since the world is open-ended, it would be odd if there were checkpoints everywhere. You're expected to save manually, so if there's a particular room that you're stuck on, you can save right before it and try as much as you need. For a bit of mana, of course. All that gets much more complicated as power-ups get introduced, but simply running and jumping already feels good. Fucking nailed it. Right from the start, the game is just so smooth. It's always fun looking at Ori's jumps and how to behave slightly differently, and the sounds of grabbing onto ledges. The stomping, the jumping, the saving, they all sound so crisp and they don't get old. Except for getting hurt, where Ori sounds like a female tennis player. They made sure you understood the basics of how Ori works, and then you get the kick. Or as most people call it, the bash. The bash takes that idea of knocking projectiles back at enemies to the extreme. And it's got good sound. It's got good sound. Really? There's not much like it. There are other platformers that reward you for jumping on projectiles, but they just felt there. You can, but why would you want to? This is more akin to Bayonetta's Witch Time, where once you get it, it becomes the backbone of most anything you do. No matter where you are, you can find a way to use it since it ties into every other ability you have. You can blast upwards, which helps in pulling off in the first place, but skills like Stomp or Gliding work better after you've already landed it. Or combine them all and get something like this. You go through levels organically made without the bash in mind and find your best way through it now, which makes those occasional straight lines of obstacles feel unique instead of clearly defined dash points. And there's a bit of strategy to every bash since you have to line up your shots, making it more than just mashing X to go forward. Once you get it, instead of tricky enemy placement, the game relies more on just trying to take the ground away from you as much as possible. Seriously, all the areas from then on have gimmicks in play to stop the floor from being as grounded as it normally would be. Large sections of no ground at all, constantly having to rotate yourself, large sections of no ground at all, again. So you always have to be on the move, and you always have to be looking for the perfect thing to bash off of. And better than all that, the bash actually cures cancer, helped black slaves go through the Underground Railroad, threw an apple at Isaac Newton's head. Okay, I'll stop now. I think the main reason why it feels so unique compared to most other games is because they're about getting stronger weapons and not better tactics. Having to use, let's say, the wall jump in combat would feel odd in a game like Super Metroid, where it's all about having range. Plus areas are too claustrophobic and your character too big to make inch-close dodges possible. The reason why climbing, floating, and bashing feels so natural is because it comes so naturally to this kind of character. And the reason why it's so unique is because this kind of character is fairly rare in most video games, because it's hard. There's a big difference between the combat in the 2D Metroid games, but in the end they all still feel good. If the areas were too small, or if they didn't have as many good level ideas, or if things just didn't have the same oomph to them, Ori would have just felt meh. Moon felt like they knew what they wanted the game to feel like and did not make compromises for it. They always make sure nothing lasts longer than it should, because if it did, the whole game would slow down. They never reuse an exact segment idea, because the game would slow down, and the individual segments never last longer than a minute, because if it did, then getting back to where you died would take too long. And dare I say it, slow the game down. It understands what makes the game fun, the speed, and knows exactly what it has to do to keep it up. There's a slight bit of floatiness to the controls, so it's not quite as precise as Mario, but that's a sacrifice for its speed and fluidity. And the things you do need to be precise about give you a slight bit of leeway, kind of like a 2D Assassin's Creed, but good. Actually no, not just good. This may have been when I knew Ori was going to be a good game, but this is when I knew it was going to be great. This is also where I can imagine some people calling it an unresponsive piece of crap, and there might be a reason for that. The specs aren't huge, but for this kind of game it demands more than you might think, and when the frame rate drops, that fluidity becomes a pace-breaking, uncomfortable, well, unresponsive piece of crap. It sucks to say, but the developers didn't add any way of toning down the graphics other than res size, and you don't want to play like this your first time in. And I'm no programmer, but couldn't they add an option to turn off unnecessary particle effects? I mean, here's the biggest case of slowdown, and every single droplet of water is its own effect. Speaking of this, I guess I should just say the PC controls are actually really well done, and I prefer them to the console controls, for all but one part. Come on. Fucking sticky keys! What other flaws are there? Oh, you have this many language options and no Korean? What the Then again, maybe turning down the graphics is not as easy as it sounds, and I still consider it a necessary evil to make things look so nice. It can occasionally happen where there's so much bloom on screen that it can be hard to tell where you are, but the levels themselves are well color-coded in ominous and cold blues and misty and washed-out greens that Ori really pops out. Ori's design is simple on purpose so it's easy to make out. At first I wondered how someone could draw pornography of a character design so simple, but browsing DeviantArt really quoed those itches. Good job. While I can't pick a favorite level, visually, Sorrow's Pass is king. The whole game looks like a mixture between Princess Mononoke and Legends of the Guardians, with Sorrow's Pass more on the side of Guardians. It has the same look of never-ending dawn that gets brighter as you go higher, and it just keeps getting more intense, but I think it's best reflected in the music. The whole area is one big shaft that snakes upwards, but instead of soaring orchestral music, it instead goes for relaxing wind chimes that go at a steady pace, with one part really catching the ears. It's just for a moment, but this late into the game, it's very introspective, making you think where you've come. But once you get the Shine Spark, you go from making slivers of progress upwards to just blasting through the air, and the music changes to a more faster, soaring pace, and as well as that piano taking alongside other instruments while you blast through the air, and the piano is equally as short, but it's exhilarating. The whole game takes place in a crowded forest with fog and trees crowding up the background, and you finally get to poke your head out for the first time, and the piano takes center stage. And they forgot to put it in the official soundtrack. The menu theme is for free, and I can get why the trailer song wasn't there since that's not in the actual game, but why this is absent still remains unknown. A few favorite songs of mine are Completing the Cycle, Fleeing Koro, Home of the Gumon, and of course, Restoring the Light, and I think we all know what we did at the very end. But as a whole, it does a good job representing each level with unique instruments. Every song has a part that sticks out, but only for a few seconds, to let the majority of it sit in the background for gameplay reasons. And biking through Linkin Park as Waters Cleansed randomly played on my iPod? That's real nice. So you beat the game and... oh. While cracking the top 1000 isn't too hard, getting past that requires something different. You know how I said that levels were split up into individual Super Meat Boy-esque chunks? Getting fast, really getting good, requires looking at the game as a whole and how the mechanics interact with one another to shave seconds or minutes off your time. But if you get good, it really does speak for itself. A few weeks ago, Games Done Quick held its first Ori speedrun, and it was a blast seeing people just as excited as I was for it. No, much more excited than I was for it.
A $500 donation from Shadowed. I've got $500 from Uranium Anchor. But I have a $100 donation from Wills. I also have a $400 donation from Wills saying, water!
Part of the hilarity of the $1,200 that you guys donated to make.
That really gave me hope for the future of Ori. Speaking of which, right as I'm writing this, Gamescom happened.
At Gamescom, we're announcing the definitive edition of Ori and the Blind Forest, which will launch holiday this year on Windows 10, on Steam, and on Xbox One. And yeah, it's going to be an amazing little package. We received a ton of fan feedback, and we're just trying to make it the ultimate version of Ori.
Holiday season? That's 4 months from now. What am I gonna do until then? There's only Just Cause 3, Fallout 4, The Phantom Pain, and the 2 other certs in my Steam library. Fuck outside! I mean, what else is there besides posting reviews on the internet, of course? Hell, I still need to get higher on those leaderboards. One of these days, I can't play 'cause I'm a cat purr. You're going down. But there will be plenty of content for those games. I'm not sure what I can say that would really be different. And in that case, why even bother making a video, considering how long it takes? But also the beauty of this forest, the enjoyment of kicking everything in sight, and the thrill of finding new speedrun routes was something not too many people really made videos about. If I made a review of New Vegas, it'd sound like every other review of New Vegas. Ori and the Blind Forest is of a fairly new breed of indie games, going at the $20 mark. Or you can get a whole 3% off by typing TL at purchase. So it might seem kind of expensive at 7 hours, but to me, that's the perfect length, and around the same time it took me to beat most of the 2D Metroids. And goddammit, sometimes it's just good to show that games like this can be profitable, cause Nintendo sure won't. This game had the feeling of somewhere truly new, not just more areas you've seen before. I know it seems like I'm shitting on a lot of games here, but Ori just doesn't have the same compromises I've come to expect. It goes past that and is just fun. the kind of fun it was to explore Brinstar, and while I don't think it's as good as Zero Mission or Super Metroid, not much is, I would say it's on par with Fusion, and that's still a 10 out of 10 in my book.